Good evening and welcome to episode number 75 of the Sports Blitz. Unbelievable. I can't believe we're at episode 75 already. We have another special episode. It's another Rivers Day Camp episode. We're very, very excited to have a special guest. But before we go to our special guest, I'm Doug. We have Robbie here. Robbie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Doug. Great. Glad to be with everybody as always. And just till tonight's episode done. Looking forward to it all week. So can't wait to get the show on the road.
That's right. And we also, just in case you're in a cave or you're under a rock, come on out, see our episode, and go back in, especially if you're in Massachusetts, because it's not safe to be out in Massachusetts. But it is safe to be out in a place where this gentleman is. I have known this gentleman since I was about 10 years old, I think. This gentleman is at least, and this gentleman is a recent director of the Rivers Day Camp. We have Ed Schreider. Ed, how are you tonight?
I am doing great, and it's great to see you guys. And I always love to talk about camp.
Certainly do. Anybody that goes to Rivers, everybody goes to Rivers, always loves to talk about Rivers Day Camp. Our last episode, we had a whole bunch of counselors on, and we had such a great time. And now we're gonna kind of shift gears a little bit, because everybody has their different stories. Colum has different stories that he's experienced.
Yeah.
And Dan Finucane and those guys and Andrew Novoni have different stories. And we go on and we have George on, and George has different stories. Ed has been in camping, and I'm gonna let him give you the synopsis of where he's been and that kind of thing. But he's been in camping a long time. And we'll definitely give him the chance to give us that jump right into our first question, Ed. Is your camping experience, and maybe give us a little bit of the origins of Rivers Day Camp.
Yeah, I think some of these stories are pretty interesting. Not too many people know the origins of how Rivers started and where the Rivers spirit came from. So I'll look at my background first. My first year of camp was 1951, if you can believe that.
Wow.
And from 1951 to 1954, I went to Beaver Country Day Camp. And it was fun. I don't remember all that much about it. My mother used to say that she didn't think that I ever went swimming. And I wasn't too happy with going in the water. And one day I came home with my sneakers on the wrong feet. So she said, he must have gone in the water. That's great.
That's perfect.
But believe it or not, I remember lots of the counselors at Beaver. And it was a good little foundation. But my parents didn't think that Beaver was rugged enough and gave me enough in the sports and the socialization and the camaraderie. I was a little kid. I didn't even know about that stuff. But they heard about a camp that was out in Holliston called Camp Potoma. So one winter day, we drove all the way out to Holliston, and we met a gentleman named Mr. Otterson. And later on, he became one of my counselors, and he drove me to camp. And he was a principal of a middle school in Arlington, which is called the Henry Otterson Middle School today. We met Mr. Otterson at Potoma, and he walked us around this real rugged, rural, backwoods camp. And then he said, would you like to see the lake, Lake Winthrop? So my mother and father, I think Jimmy was there, me, we walked down a half mile to Lake Winthrop. And when we say it was rugged, it was unbelievable with rocks and tree stumps. And my mother said, I don't know if these kids are going to make it at this camp, because it was a half-mile down and a half-mile up twice a day to go to this camp. But anyways, they signed me up for this camp. And it happened to have been the oldest day camp in the United States. Not too many people knew that. So I was at Potomac, and I'll tell you some Potomac stories, from 1955 till 1969. Then I came over to Rivers in 1970. I'll tell you that story. And I stayed there until 2019, which was 49 years. No gold watch. I didn't make it to 50. But let me go back and tell you about Rivers School. Rivers School. All right. There were 3 Rivers schools, I think, that I know of. The first one was in a brownstone on Bay State Road, right where BU is. You know Bay State Road? Yeah, kind of behind Commonwealth Avenue.
Yep.
And they had a 5-story brownstone, and it was a boys' school. Then they got very popular, and they moved out to Chestnut Hill. And right across, interestingly enough, from Beaver Country Day Camp was a English tutor set back on Hammond Street mansion. And that became Rivers School number 2. And it was an outdoor school because of the flu. And we can relate to that. And the number of deaths that they had in the Boston area and in Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, my grandfather lost 2 brothers in 1 week to the flu. So when they talk about COVID and the number of deaths, you can really imagine the same kind of thing for this flu in the early 1900s. So this river school was an outdoor school. So it had a roof, but it had no sides. And even in the winter, the kids were there with their bomber hats and gloves, and they got their education in the cold air. Now, this river school building is still there. It's Brookline Recreation. And it's set back kind of opposite Beaver. Okay. Now, this was in the 30s that I think they moved there. And they started a little bit of a camp in the 30s and the 40s at this old river school. And they had an above ground pool, and they had sports, and Rivers teachers were counselors. And right in front of the building is a taxi cab company. And the owner of the taxi cab company was a man named William S. Carroll, Bill Carroll. I don't know if you ever saw that name on a bus.
Yes, definitely on a bus. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Bill Carroll owned Checker taxi cabs. Did you ever hear of Checker cabs?
Yes, of course.
There was a car company called Checker, and they made this square-looking box-like cab. And they were yellow, they were black, and there were stripes along the side like a checkerboard. And they had a jump seat. So you had seats in front, seats in back, and then in front of the back seats, they had a jump seat that you could pull down to put extra people to go to the airport or wherever. Well, the headmaster of Old Rivers, now in Chestnut Hill, he asked Bill Carroll to provide cabs to take kids out to Holliston to swim at Lake Winthrop and to play in some of the fields that they had out there, right around the lake area. Okay. Well, one day, the headmaster of Old Rivers said to Bill Carroll, "We'd like to lend you some money to buy a bus." So they bought a bus, And he bused the kids in greater numbers. Instead of 6, 7, 8, 10 cabs, they went by bus out to Lake Winthrop and they swam and had a cookout and had a fun day. By the way, this bus company grew to become William S. Carroll Bus Company on Hammond Street in Brooklyn. And I worked for them, and I'll tell you that story later on. And today, that bus company, William S. Carroll, is called Crystal Transportation. And Crystal runs all the buses for
Okay.
the university. They're located in Brighton, but that's the origins of Crystal Bus. Okay, one year, an enterprising young teacher who was the English department chairman at the Old River School, and he became athletic director, was a man named Thomas W. Layden Sr. And Tom Layden bought acres and acres of land in Holliston above the lake, half a mile up from the lake. And he built a dining hall. He built lodges for dressing rooms. He built craft lodges. We joke because they called one Crafts A and the other Craft B. Not crafts, but craft. We did GIMP, we did woodworking, and things like that. Okay. I wasn't there at the beginning. This was the late 30s and into the 40s and into the 50s and into the late 60s. He called the camp Camp Potomac. Now that sounds like a Native American name. Oh, his children were Pat, Tom, and Marshall. Pa, Tom, Ma. Pat, Tom, and Marshall. Patricia, Thomas Jr., and Marshall Layden. Yeah. Well, as Camp Potomac grew in popularity, Tom Layden hired Rivers teachers to become counselors and to work during the summer so they continued to get an income. One young teacher who just got out of the Navy, World War II, was a young man named Paul Light that he hired as a counselor. Another young man was a young man named Andy Navoni. He hired as Jimmy's father, Andrew's grandfather.
Right.
That he hired to be counselors. I arrived at Potomac in 1955, and Paul Light was my counselor. Can you believe that?
Wow. No.
And he had a dog.
Wow.
And he had a dog, and the dog's name was Doc. He was a boxer, and that dog was our tribe mascot. He brought the dog out to camp every day. Now, Paul's son, who we all know, Mark, was a year in a tribe a year ahead of me. And another good friend of Mark's was a guy named Paul Flaherty. And it was Light and Flaherty. They did tag team wrestling on the beach. And everybody looked up to Mark and Paul Flaherty. They were lifelong buddies. As a matter of fact, Paul Flaherty used to come out to Rivers every single year on an afternoon to visit us and reminisce about Potomac. Well, I made two new friends my first year in 1955. A boy named Dick Morse, who we all know, and Dick was from Holliston, so he didn't have to travel too far. And another young boy named Bernie Sullivan, who we all know very well. And he was from Medway. And we are still good friends today. I just spoke to Dick the other day, as a matter of fact,
Yes.
to see if he got his shot yet, and he did, which was good. and he's very good friends with my brother Jim. Now, during those years of Potomac, they had a grove of pine trees, and they were hundreds of trees in a row, and about 20 rows. And we learned to play capture the flag in the grove. And believe me, you had to have your head up and your eyes open, or you'd smack right into a tree. And that's where I first played capture the flag, which was a great game. But during those years of Potomac, I learned all kinds of sports. Those are the formative years. I learned to play softball. I learned to play baseball. I learned to play tag football. We had archery. Believe it or not, we had riflery with 22s. They were chained down because they didn't want you to, lift it and turn it. And as a matter of fact, they practically aimed it for you because you put the muzzle into a hole and then the gun was chained on the outside. So you really couldn't move it too far. But we learned riflery, we had tennis, we learned how to sail, we learned how to swim, and it was a fantastic camp. And the food was out of this world. To this day, I can remember the chicken stew that they had. I remember the American chop suey.
Oh.
I remember the cooks. One of the cooks had a son in our group, Mrs. Mahan, Ronnie Mahan's mother, and another one was Mrs. Whitestone. And these women worked in the cafeterias of the schools in Holliston, and then they came and had a summer job, and they made all the food from scratch, and it was just fantastic. It was great. I learned sportsmanship. I learned camaraderie. I learned how to become a counselor. And I was 14 years old, and I became a CIT. And everybody lived to become a CIT. And Dick and Bernie, me, Mark was ahead of us as a CIT. And our counselor was a guy named Ed Furphy, who was a teacher in Millis or Medway, one of those school systems. And we had a textbook. We had to read a chapter each week. And I remember this as if it were yesterday. It was written by a guy named Elmer OTT. And it was called, So You Want to Become a Good Camp Counselor. That was the book. Every Friday, we had a written test on a chapter. And I mean, it was good, solid, how to relate to kids, how to give kids a good time, how much leeway you can give kids and having a good time, and when you have to draw them in, how to respect one another. It was a classic textbook on how to become a good counselor, and really how to become a teacher. And that river spirit was really developed at Potomac, first by Paul Light, Andy Navoni. We had another counselor, Sal Lombardo, another guy, Bert Butler, a lot of teachers from Rivers, a lot of teachers from, what was that name, that college in Franklin? There was a college in Franklin, Dean Junior College. He hired a lot of guys from Dean, and it was just a great group of guys. And then the next generation of counselors was Mark and Paul Flaherty and me and my brother and Dick and Bernie. And that was all transferred over to Rivers later on. Now, as we were counselors, we got paid for driving kids from Brookline, Newton, Wellesley, Wayland, out to Potomac. So I got my bus driver's license, and I worked for William S. Carroll Bus Company. And the Angel School in Newton, in Waban, was the meeting place. So a whole bunch of counselors in their own cars picked up carloads of kids, dropped them off at Angel School, then went and picked up a new load of kids and went out to Potomac. I picked up 20 kids at their house by the bus, and I pulled up to Angel School, and there were 50 kids that got on the bus, plus the 20. And then I drove out to Rivers, so I got 2 checks, one from Potomac and one from the bus company. And then I worked for the bus company on weekends doing charter trips. So that was fun too. And when Rivers School moved to Weston in the early 60s, we all stayed at Potomac, but the headmaster of Rivers School said to Paul Light, I want you to come out in the summer to this new place where he was now a teacher in Weston, and I want you to start a camp. So Paul Light quit and Mark, they quit Potomac, and they started a day camp at Rivers in Weston when Rivers was brand new out in Weston. And the first year they had 25 at Rivers.
Wow.
And Tom Layden, in I guess 67, was ill, and he passed away, and his son Tom Jr. Came to direct the camp. But Tom lived in Florida, where the Red Sox used to play, Winter Park, that area. And he really never had his heart in running the camp. And at a young age, Bernie, Dick, myself, Paul Flaherty, and those guys, we really ran the camp. He really didn't know what was going on. And in the winter of 1969, there was a fire, and much of Potomac burnt down. I can remember the phone call I got from Dick, and he said, "You won't believe it, but there was a big fire, and the main lodge is gone, and several of the other buildings are gone. I don't know what's going to happen this summer." And Tom Jr. decided to close the camp in 1969 after the fire. And many of us wondered what we should do. And we said, well, let's get in touch with Mark and Paul and see if there are any jobs at Rivers. So we all applied at Rivers. Now, at the same time, I got a teaching job in Hingham. And that started my 35 years of teaching in Hingham. And at the same time, I got my new summer job at Rivers, 1970. And at the same time, I became engaged to Linda. And believe it or not, we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary in August.
Wow.
So a lot of new things happened to me at that time. And I had just got my master's degree at Boston University, and my master's was in educational administration. And it was how to become an administrator in a school or in a camp. So I was very excited about all these things that were happening to me. The teaching job, the camp job, and getting married, getting engaged. Linda was starting, just as we got engaged, to teach in Malden. She was a French teacher. And she got a job at Mount Ida during the summer as a camp counselor. So we shared experiences when we got home from camp each day. So in my years at Beaver and Potomac and Rivers, I was a camper, I was a CIT, I was a counselor, I was the archery director at Potomac, I became the CIT director with Dick Morse the very first year that we worked at Potomac. Then I became the assistant boys camp director, then the boys camp director, then the assistant director of the camp, and then the director. So talking about working your way up, but it took
Understatement.
49 years
49 years to get there.
to get that. And so it was interesting. So Paul and Mark hired Dick and myself to become CIT directors. And it was a brand new program because the camp was starting to build up. And Paul Light saw the value of training kids to become counselors. And there was your future generation of counselors. He said that he would back us up in anything we wanted to do, in any way we wanted to run the program, as long as we were successful and produced that became counselors and stayed year after year after year and developed that spirit. Well, the very first year, we did not ask back two young boys who just didn't have their heart in the program, fooled around, and didn't care. They happened to have been the two prestigious alumni's children. Paul Light backed us up, and Dick and I said, you know, he is serious. If he let us not ask these kids to become counselors, and their fathers are big donors, then he means business in terms of we can really do what we want as long as we get results. And that really taught us, you know, something. So over the years at Rivers, Paul Light retired from teaching, and he was a graphic arts teacher. The kids loved him. And to this day, I know a lot of people that had him as a teacher, and they were so dedicated to him. A guy named Dave Feldman, another guy named Saltonstall. I ran into all these people over the years, and they just loved Paul Light. They really did. And some of them were also classmates of Mark, and they had a great relationship with Mark too. So after Paul retired and moved to Florida for the winter, although he flew back, he used to buy a ticket with Eastern Airlines, a eight book ticket, 8 coupons. Each was a flight because he really had his heart in the camp, and he loved Florida, and C loved Florida, but he used to fly up for a weekend and then fly back and get business done. But he asked me to start working on the weekends, to do what he did since he started Rivers, and that was interview every new child and their family that was applying to come to Rivers. So I came in on Saturdays and Sundays. I set up 25 or 30 folding chairs, and I sold the camp. I talked about the schedule. I talked about the staff. I talked about the activities. And I saw a lot of the kids were really scared. They weren't tremendously excited. They were more nervous than excited. So one year I decided during the summer to take slides and let them see, because at first I had an album and we turned the pages and it was, all right. I started to take pictures and I put together a slideshow. And I showed slides and I got more of a reaction from the kids. Then the next year I decided to put music to it. So it's something, Doug, you could do with your experience with DJ
stuff,
whole thing. So I got a song, which I didn't know how great it was going to be. It was Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin.
Of course.
Well, that song was so hypnotic to kids that when they came in to my little meeting with trepidation and fear and not knowing what camp was going to be like, and they saw the slides with "Don't worry, be happy," it sold the camp. It was unbelievable what that song did. It was unreal. And I put together a guesstimate, and it's a pretty close guesstimate of how many kids I interviewed. And believe it or not, it was close to 25,000.
Oh, I think I was one of them.
Wow.
I think I was one of them back then. I know
25,000.
my mom said she met with Paul. So yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
And we used to walk around the camp in the winter and in the snowstorms and try to picture, after you saw the slides, this is where we swim. These are the pens. This is where we have the rafts. This is where the sailboats are and the canoes are. And they could get it because they just saw the slides, and now they could sort of envision. And we went into Haffenreffer, and we went into the dining room, which was underneath the building at first.
Where the art was, it where art is, or where woodworking was. Yeah.
Yeah, and science
Just
was
recently,
there.
yeah. Science
know,
building, yeah.
Yeah, and it was terrific. And then in the afternoons, I interviewed 5,000 counselors in all the years that I did that. So 25,000 kids
Wow.
and 5,000 counselors.
That's crazy.
And I enjoyed doing that. It was fun. A lot of Celtics players. There was Paul Silas, John Havlicek, some politicians' kids, a guy from Channel 4, Tom Ellis, his kid, Bob Lobel, his kid, and it was fun seeing all these people. And I met so many people and had lasting relationships with a lot of them. And I also planned in the afternoons and on Sundays new activities like pillow polo and G-ball. G-ball was named after a custodian named George. That's what G-ball, not Jim Ball. It was G-ball for George, who wouldn't let us play. So when he went away for the afternoon, we played. So that was G-ball. George lived in the, you remember where Jimmy Navoni lived? In that front area where the music school was?
Oh, right, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where George lived. And one day his wife backed the car up into the pond. So, yeah, that's where George was. But what I tried to do in my interviews, I tried to have a safe, assuring environment for kids to go to camp. And then I got into purchasing equipment, and I got into contracting buses and talking about menus and hiring nurses and putting together an ACA book, which Mark Light did first, which was a whole months and months of work, this thick of regulations in order to be accredited by ACA and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the town of Weston. I mean, it was really rigorous with all these things. And it was a true joy for me to see the smiles on children's faces as they progressed socially and athletically. And you guys, same thing. You know, it's so reassuring to see that what you set up for somebody turns out good, and these kids are having fun, and they're smiling, and they're learning to be human beings, and they're making friends, sometimes lifelong, and they're learning sportsmanship, and they're learning choices, and all those kinds of things, and how to swim, which is so important, and how to sail, and how to develop self-esteem. And these kids, you know, they returned. year after year. And their children came to camp and their grandchildren came to camp. It was unbelievable. We had 800 kids coming and going, season after season after season. And I also tried to set a positive example for my staff. And many of them made me so proud, like Stu, because they became teachers, and Robbie, who's involved in teaching. And you can't imagine what that does for you, the feeling it gives you. It was such a satisfying career that I had. And the joy of working at camp with Linda. And she had the phone calls, and she quieted the parents down who were complaining before they got to me, which was, a real honor. And, she used to say when a parent complained, do you really think that happened? Do you really think that you would send a child to a camp that would happen? And they said, well, no, I guess not. So she kind of quieted him down pretty good. And then, of course, I worked with Jimmy all those years, and Jimmy and Dick and Jimmy and Lloyd worked as CIT directors. And then Lisa and Wendy became counselors. They were there 22 years, campers, CITs, junior counselors and counselors. And that was being at camp with your kids and your wife, and with Jimmy and his kids, and his wife worked there. And then the pièce de résistance with my mother and father. I got them a job. I was their boss. And I sat down with Paul and Mark, and I said, the first graders are not succeeding at shop. They're too sophisticated for junior shop, but they aren't ready yet for ironing shop. Remember Arnie and Jim?
Oh, yeah.
First graders weren't ready for that. The benches were too high. The tools were too heavy. So I said, what if my mother and father ran a shop only for first graders? We'll call it Shop 3. So he said, well, what are their qualifications? I said, besides being my mother and father, I said, my mother was a teacher for years and years and years. And as a matter of fact, she taught until age 88. My father was in the furniture business. He knew wood because half the furniture that came into his store was damaged and he had to fix it. So he could fix a kid's project. She had the classroom dynamics and he had the wood dynamics. And they started Shop 3 and it was terrific. And the kids would come in, hi, Judy and Stanley. And one little kid, first grader, said to his counselor, which one which? Because Stanley is not a common name. Nobody named their kid Stanley in that generation. So the kid didn't know which one, and Judy wasn't either. So which one's which? Who's Judy and who's Stanley, right? And they had a blast. And my father passed away at age 80, and he worked right till age 80. My mother continued. She taught to age 88. They kicked her out because they said she wasn't fast enough in a fire drill to get off the second floor. But she continued at camp until age 98, which was unbelievable. And it was unbelievable having. As a matter of fact, an interesting story. My mother got some sort of an infection, and she had to be hospitalized. And this kind of infection causes elderly people to be confused. So she was in the hospital, and the doctor called me, and he said, I know you come in and visit her every day. I don't want you to be upset, but before the antibiotics start really working, people get very confused. and I was just in with your mother, and she told me that she thinks she's a camp counselor. I said, she is. The doctor must have thought I was crazy too. I said, she is a camp counselor. He says, well, now let's discuss this. I said, nothing to discuss. She's a camp counselor. So he finally did believe me. And thank goodness she got better and she continued to work at camp, which was kind of a funny story. But what a wonderful career. What wonderful people I met and dealt with, like you guys. And I can't believe it was 68 straight summers at day camp. And the only difference was that my shorts were bigger and I drove. It's unbelievable how time flew and how much fun we had. And, you know, I could really write a book. I kept all my notes, all the funny notes I kept. I've got crazy early dismissal. As a matter of fact, we wanted to change the name of the camp to Camp Note. Camp Rivers, because we would get a stack of notes every day this big. We got complaints, of course. We've got complaints against other kids. My son said that this boy told him, etc. I got complaints about counselors. This counselor said a bad word. My son never heard the word, and now my son only says it all the time. Okay. We had two ladies in the kitchen. Do you remember them?
I think I do.
Dolly and Polly?
Yeah, Dolly and Polly, of course. Yes, of course.
Well, back then, I don't know if you remember, you had to have a note for peanut butter and jelly. And if you didn't have one, you weren't going to get it. And we used to laugh at that. And when Jimmy was a counselor, I mean, he was in his 30s or 40s, he brought in a note for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because he was a fussy eater and he didn't want what they were serving that day. A lot of parents sent me notes that were, what else can you do for me? Notes. You know, my cherished note was a note from a little boy named Josh. And I have this note. It is a classic. Dear Ed, last night, Josh swallowed a ball bearing. She sent Josh in with this note and with a empty Brigham's container and 2 throat sticks like a doctor or a nurse would use. Okay. So I'll go on with the letter. If Josh has a bowel movement, would you please go through it to see if he passed the ball bearing? I said to Paul Light, this is above my pay grade. What do we do? Paul said, get on the phone, call his mother, tell him to pick him up right away. And after he passes the ball bearing, he's welcome to come back to team. This is a classic. That's chapter 2.
Oh my God.
And we had Parents' Day. Remember Parents' Day?
Oh yeah.
We used to call that the parade of the Volvos. Right? Everybody had a Volvo. And there was a father with a brand new video camera, and he went to hide down at archery as the arrows were flying by him, taking a video of his kid until Bernie noticed some movement in the bushes. And he ran down, stopped the shooting, and he ran down and he said to the father, sir, please don't stand there. The arrows these kids aren't that great at aiming, right? Then we had We had the father that ran in the water. His kid was doing bobs.
Yeah.
and Father thought the kid
We
was
were
drowning.
talking about that last episode.
Yeah.
He had his phone in his pocket, his shoes, and he ran in the water to save her. She was, well, I'm doing bobs. And well, that was fun. Everybody was always on their best behavior, except for the kids during
Yeah.
Parents' Day. You know? And Paul Light, he had such a good heart, and Mark. And they hired a lot of people that were sometimes down and out and needed a job. And
There you
he
go.
would trust them, and they became great counselors. And they needed the summer job, and he felt so badly for them. And some of our best counselors, you know, are these people that were so thankful for working in the summer and getting extra money for doing extra things, pre-camp, post-camp, overnights, and things like that. And talking about overnights, I love to talk about overnights.
Oh, yeah.
The overnight thing started at Potomac. And the overnights were Friday night, all day Saturday, Saturday night, Sunday noon. All right. So, and you got money to drive the kids home Sunday afternoon after the ice cream sundae. We drove the kids home. I made more money driving kids home Sunday afternoon than I did Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday till noon. You know, that was fun. And at Rivers, when we started with the overnights, they were solely original ideas and mostly scaring. And it was a different generation of kids back then. Could never do this my last 10, 15 years.
No way.
Never do it today. We had the haunted house in the barn.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It was scary for even
It
a
was.
couple.
It was.
Remember Tom McDonald?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Well, Tom went into the meat market in Boston, and he got a leg of some animal dripping with blood. And that scared the living daylight out of everybody when he came out from behind a curtain with a face like Frankenstein and a leg of beef bleeding. Oh my God. Half those kids went home that early. They didn't stay over, right? And then, of course, we had trips down to the pond and the swamp for the hairy frompus.
Absolutely.
And then that scared the kids. And we had to console them because they were all crying. They didn't want to go to sleep. They wanted to go home. Then I think it was Jimmy that said, you know, I think this is a little too scary for kids. And let's do more, less scaring and more fun and enjoyment. And nobody can get nervous. And so we started with food, lots of food. So we went to make your own pizzas for dinner. So I went out to this company in Norwood, and you get the shells, and then they sell you the number 10 cans of sauce, and then big packages of cheese. And we had the kids line up and make their own pizzas. And then we put them in the ovens, and they took them out. And the kids, oh, they were thrilled. They made their own pizza. Then right after that, we had make your own Sundaes. I don't know if you guys were old enough for that.
Yes.
And it was
I do remember that.
Oh, I remember that.
with
Yeah.
three
Oh, yeah.
kinds of ice cream, and then fudge sauce, butterscotch, marshmallow,
Everything.
nuts, everything. Then
Yep.
they would go into Jimmy's penny candy store. You remember that? And the
I
room
do.
was horseshoe.
Filled.
You had to go up this aisle, down that aisle, in this aisle, in that aisle, and out this aisle. So you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of candy. And then you were allowed to eat filled bags of candy.
Filled.
And I think, you remember Ferrucci?
Yeah, Ferrucci. Yeah, fed two. That was the two kids with Ferrucci's. What
Yeah.
were that two? Ben and I
That's
can't
right.
remember. Yeah.
Ben's, I think, a doctor today.
Oh, is he?
He brought $100 because we gave each kid $2 was included. And Ferrucci brings $100. And Jimmy starts filling up the bags and bags and bags. Then you were allowed a half hour to eat your candy. And then we stapled it and put your name on it. And then you would get it Friday on your way home. Friday. Okay. Well, we made a tremendous mistake. After make your own pizza one night, and the ice cream sundaes, and the penny candy, and eating the penny candy, we rented a cotton candy machine.
Oh, I remember that too.
You never saw so many kids throwing up in your life. They were throwing up on the old archery field. They were throwing up in the waste buckets. They were throwing up in the locker room, the gym floors, the classrooms. Never again did we rent a cotton candy machine because that did it. We kept with the pizza, we kept with the Sundays, we kept with the candy, but we did away with the cotton candy. That just didn't work at all. And then something else happened. The older staff didn't want to work anymore because it was too much. It was go, go, go from 4 o'clock when everybody else left, the start of the overnight, until about 11 o'clock at night with bombardment. And the older staff said, we can't work Friday. We're exhausted and it kills my weekend. So I said, and this was my idea, if you, and Linda, I think Linda had that idea too. If you get somebody else to provide the entertainment, will you older guys work? And they said, let's give it a try. So we went with the Route 9 special. Remember that? Vinny
Oh yeah.
miniature golf and bowling at fairways.
Oh, yeah.
We went with Chuck E. Cheese, first out in Danvers, then they opened up in Natick. We went with movies. We went with Millbury Amusement Park out in Millbury near Worcester. And it was like a miniature Revere Beach type thing. Nothing was really too dangerous or too scary or too fast. Millbury Amusement Park, and the kids had a blast. And then we came back, played a little bit, and they went to sleep. And the councils were okay Friday, and they were okay for the weekend. So, I mean, that worked out pretty good. We went to Paw Sox. And remember they took a picture at the front page of the Globe or Herald of the group, and Steve Geary was fast asleep, sitting with the kids.
I remember that.
I said, geez, that's a great advertisement for counselors at women's camp, right?
Yes.
Fast asleep.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then we went with the overdays. Yeah. Linda's idea for the overday. She's reminding me. It was Linda's idea for the overday. That gave the kid a little bit of an experience, but they didn't have to sleep over, and everybody went home at 9 o'clock. And we had fishing and all kinds of things like that. And it was just terrific. And then Robbie remembers this whole thing too. Last couple of years, we had an exchange program of children from China. And the director was Australian. He was married to a French,
Yeah.
no, he was married to a Chinese lady, and they lived in Paris.
Yeah.
So, William, his name was William. So we had to do all the paperwork. And the town of Weston had to get involved. And we had to get all the kids' medicals. And the kids were within 1 day of boarding the plane to fly. And I got a call from the town of Weston, and she said, kids can't come. I said, what? They're coming tomorrow. Said, in America, you need 2 chickenpox shots. In China, you only need 1. So I emailed William and I said, you got to get these kids a second chickenpox shot. And I don't know how he did it, but he got a doctor to meet everybody at the airport. And these kids were inoculated with the second chickenpox shot and a little certificate that they got it. And they got on the plane and they came. So that was one thing.
Wow.
Then I said, before they came, would these kids like Eastern food, Asian food? Or what do we do about food? He said, these kids are paying for a Western experience. And they're going to eat what every kid eats. So I said, rice? No rice. So we served them day food. Well, one day they were here. They were serving tater tots. Kids never, ever had tater tots. Well, they overdosed. They loved tater tots. All they could talk about, they came in the day every day. Ed, are we going to have tater tots today? Everything was tater tots. And we did have a lot of tater tots because they loved them and they didn't have them. Now, we had no liability once they left camp because they stayed with families who, it was an agency called something like Homestay, and the families got $50 a day, a night. And their responsibility was drive the kids to camp, pick them up, give them supper, give them a room to sleep in, and bring them back to camp the next day. That's all the responsibility. So one day, one of the stay home, whatever it's called, homestay parents, drives up where I stood, where the buses all came and the parents. And this guy gets out of the car and he really gruff and he says, who's in charge here? I said, I am. He says, you see that fat kid over there? He broke my drums. What are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. I said, it's at your house. You're responsible. We're only responsible during the day. So, that was that. And then, of course, there was one kid in Robbie's tribe that loved Robbie.
Chaz.
Chaz. Robbie.
Robbie and I, yeah, we know Chaz very well. I'm actually in the process of trying to find him.
The last day of camp, he came over to me and started crying. He said, I had the most fun at Rivers Camp. I want to come back every year. He said, when I go home, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my name. I said, you're going to change your name? What are you going to change it to? He says, I'm going to be Robbie Johnson. Well, that was unbelievable. That's the kind of effect that you had on this kid. I remember the kid could not drink cold water. None of the kids wanted ice water. And Robbie used to get lukewarm water. He used to go back in the kitchen, right, Robbie? And used to turn both faucets and make it lukewarm water for the kid. They didn't want ice water. So that was an experience. That was fun.
He was. Yeah, I mean, it was just amazing. to
Oh,
me,
yeah.
to like just to hear, because I remember you told that story at the counselor dinner that year. And it's like, first of all, I remember I started laughing hysterically, but it's also it meant a lot, to know that like he took so much out of that experience, and like to know that you had that I had such an impact on him. Definitely, it's definitely a good feeling for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So somewhere in Beijing, there's a kid running now named Robbie Johnson.
That's probably why I can't find
Yeah.
him. He's already changed his name.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
Unbelievable.
all in all, it was a wonderful 68 straight summers. Really
Wow.
was. Yeah.
So I mean, I think like keep talking during these episodes is like River truly felt like sort of our home away from home every summer. It did feel like a family environment. I mean, all the counselors that came back year after year after year, it was something special that it definitely gave, even though we're not there anymore. It gave memories that just will last a lifetime.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, the question I did want to ask, because I was about that, was obviously the campus went through a lot of changes and transformations over the years, with like adding the Mccall building, the renovation of the student center. So as as the one that was in charge of the campus, just sorting through that as an administrator, what was that like to someone who had been at Rivers for a long time, to see the campus and then the camp evolve as the years went?
I think I got most of that question. It was kind of garbled a little bit,
I know.
cut in and out. But when I started at Rivers, we had very few buildings there. The Berwyn building wasn't there. We had the dining room underneath with the classrooms. We had 400 or 500 kids on a rainy day in and out of the gym.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kids used to like to, when it was pouring, the downspouts, they used to put their heads under the downspouts, and they loved it. And then we had sports stories with Jim Dancy in the bus. We had no place to put the kids. We didn't have the kind of facility that we wound up having in later years. And there was something to be said about the camp without those new beautiful facilities. I mean, they were great, but having the dining room with a very short ceiling, remember that ceiling? It was only about like 7 feet high.
Oh yeah.
And I'll never forget, it was my birthday, unfortunately, during the summer. And every year there was something crazy on my birthday. And I was trying to think what it was. I came down the stairs into what became, it was the old dining room. And it became broken up into shop 3 classes. It was all those classrooms down there. Picture an open space of the dining room. Okay. I came down and everybody started singing happy birthday. And Mark Light had a pie. And that pie was coming, and I ducked. And behind me, playing the guitar, happy birthday, was Bill Maxwell.
Bill.
And he got the pie in the face. I'll never forget that. And I'll never forget how during an overnight, we were in the classroom that we had for drama. I don't even remember which one. But anyways, there was a little stage in there. And we brought in a kiddie pool. And we made a make-your-own sundae out of Mark Light. So he's sitting on a chair in a kiddie pool. And we said to Mark, what kind of ice cream do you like? Vanilla? Okay. Oh, tons of vanilla. You like fudge sauce or butterscotch? He says fudge sauce. We dumped all this fudge sauce on him. You like marshmallow or whipped cream? Both. Marshmallow, whipped cream, all on his head, dripping down. And, you know, these are the things you're never going to forget. And we did it in buildings that didn't have the beauty that we wound up having at the end. So we made do with what we had. And, you know, even in the rain, we had slip and slide on the
Yeah.
hill.
On the hill. Yeah, where the
And then we had-
gazebo is.
We
Well,
had the
was.
fire department come in with a truck.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah,
And spray everybody, and, you know, that was fabulous. And,
right, yeah.
and then, I don't know if you guys were around for this one, but I got a call one day from like a, I don't know if he was from Hollywood or what. He was an agent. And he said, we are presenting a new talent. And her name was, what was her name? Oh, I forget her name. No, I'll remember as we go on. She was just like that singer. What's the name of that singer? That the pop singer? Name a pop singer that's
Taylor Swift,
Britney Spears.
Britney Spears.
She was supposed to be Britney Spears before Britney Spears. Angel Faith. Her name was Angel.
Yes.
Were you there?
Yes.
Oh my
Oh
God.
yeah, I remember that. I remember that absolutely.
Well, everybody was waiting for Angel Faith, a rock star. Well, all the powers to be at Rivers were looking out the window, and this tour bus with a voluptuous young lady on the bus, side of the bus, pulls into Rivers. And poor Bruce Amesbury, may he rest in peace, said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" She performed with all the loudspeakers and everything, Doug, you know, the loudest boom boxes.
Yeah,
Robbie, wasn't that something?
Oh yeah. Oh
It
yeah.
was one of the happiest days the campers ever had. It was something else.
They loved it. They loved it.
And we
Yeah.
had,
yeah. No, just recently, I remember we were actually on the national news with at the waterfront. Yeah, I to tell that little story there, Ed, too. Where
you
where
mean
we
the
were
one
on
with my mother?
I think it was. I think that might have been the one.
Yeah, and
before
right.
that.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
it the challenge? Was it
Yes.
the
Yes, it was.
yeah,
Yeah, first it was WCVB TV
Oh,
right,
called,
yeah.
and they said, "We'd like to come out and would like to do a story of the challenge." No, the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Ice Bucket Challenge, right?
Pete Frady
That's right.
started that whole thing.
Right.
And we did that whole thing on the raft, on the dock,
Right.
on the T dock.
That's
and then
right.
jumped in the water. And CVB sent it to ABC.
Right. Yes.
And we were on.
The national
Yeah.
news. Yeah.
Well, speaking of something I forgot to tell you, with the rivers, with the Potomac Spirit, Paul Light, after the fire at Potomac, Paul Light bought all Potomac stuff. You guys remember the U-Dock?
Of course.
That was
Yeah.
Potomac's
Oh yeah.
U-Dock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Oh,
remember, even the buoys said, the lifesavers said Camp Potomac, and all the sports equipment and the bags that Jimmy Navoni used to drag out with him were all Camp Potomac equipment, and the bows. And Bernie kept saying, "I can't believe I got Camp Potomac bows, and here we are at Rivers." But my mother was also on the national news. We, I don't know how ABC found out about it. Not CVB, but ABC News. We got a call, and they said, "We heard that you have an intergenerational staff." And we had, which was true, besides my mother, we had Arnie, we had Jim Crudup, we had Jim Dancy. We had a lot of older counselors that I hired. And they said, could we come out and do a shoot on intergenerational counselors? And we said, yes. So they sent, oh yeah, yeah. How do you like that? Yeah. There's my mother and Lisa and Wendy, me and Linda. Excellent. Yeah. They sent John Berman. You know, he is CNN now. But
Yeah.
he was,
Yeah.
he was,
Oh, yeah.
he was a reporter for ABC, and he fed his stories to Diane Sawyer. Remember her?
Yes, of course.
So they did
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole
Yep.
story, and he did a whole thing on Shop 3, and he wanted to make a Jeep. So he started working on it, and he was so proud of it. And he said to my mother, what do you think? And she felt it, and she said, it needs more sanding. So, and that made it, I think that's on, you can Google that and see that today on intergenerational staff. And then it was on the front page of the Globe, above the fold, a picture of my mother and the whole Rivers Camp story. That was something, you know, unbelievable.
I just thought, Ed, the intergenerational situation there, and the fact that there were teachers hired, and there were teachers hired for specific, very, very specific reasons, is because these were people that were experienced in dealing with kids. And it was very, very, I think everybody, including yourself, were very choosy about how you chose different people.
Mhm.
Make sure, even going up in the ranks, to make sure. And some people made it and some people didn't, and that's okay. That makes sense.
Right.
And I think the most important part is that when something did happen at camp, and sometimes it did, that everybody reacted in a way where they're supposed to react, whether it was an emergency down at the waterfront. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, it was quite a long time ago, but it was, Sandy was down there, and I can't remember who else was part of the swim staff, but there was, we had a buddy whistle, and everybody got a buddy, and you're supposed to raise your buddy's hand with you so you can count. And I was I was actually in my group. I counted everybody in my group. Everybody was fine. But the group next to me, the person who was, and I don't remember who the counselor was who was teaching the swim, counted, and there was a kid missing. And he counted again, and then a third time. And then we noticed that the kid was missing. There was nothing. I think his name was Chip, I think. And it wasn't Sandy's son, but it was a kid named Chip. And again, this was a very long time ago. So Sandy blew 3 whistles, which means emergency. And we were in the pen. So we started the line in between. And then the counselors that were out at the docks got their kids up on the docks. They were already there up on the docks. And they started to do the rescue swim that they were taught.
Right.
And then tennis, the guys from tennis came down because they heard the 3 whistles.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guys from tennis also, when they were running down to the waterfront, they grabbed 4 counselors that were doing that were on break or something like that. They came down. They went and jumped in the water with their shorts on, no bathing suits.
Yeah.
With their shorts on. The Weston Fire Department was called. The fire department showed up, and then this is actually the funny part of the story, which is not. Chip was fine. The kid Chip came back.
He went to the bathroom himself.
He was in the nurse. He was in the nurse, and he went to the bathroom, and that's why it took so long. But I don't know if he told the counselor, he didn't tell the counselor, but this is my perspective. And starting there as a camper at 10 years old,
People cared.
everybody cared. One of the
Right.
reasons why my mother, who was also a teacher and a director of preschool,
Right.
one of the reasons why my mother loved that camp and she never worried about me at the camp was because there were teachers there.
Yeah.
There were teachers that were counselors. There were adults there. There were people that were responsible.
Yeah.
When she went for the interview with Paul and Mark and maybe even you, I don't know if you were there or not, it was, she felt very comfortable about sending her kid, 2 kids,
Yeah.
after a while, sending 2 kids to that camp and she knew she didn't have to worry during the day.
Yeah.
That's what made the camp even more special because of the fact that the parents really didn't have to worry about their kids.
That's what I tried to sell, that a third of our staff are teachers,
Right.
1/3 are college students, and 1/3 are former CITs that we trained and are up and coming. And they really liked it. Do you remember, I brought in 9 kids that I had once taught from Hingham, and they all came in a van from Hingham every day.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And I also brought in some fellow teachers from Hingham. One of my closest friends, I don't know if you remember Kevin Mccall. He was
Yeah,
a teacher
that
with
sounds
me.
familiar. Yeah.
And he traveled from Kingston every day to come to camp with his son. He said he thought it would be good bonding time to drive home with his son and to and from camp. His son fell asleep on Bogle Street and slept all the way to Kingston.
Perfect.
He thought it would be good bonding. And then my good friend Jack Curran, I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember Jack,
It sounds
he
familiar. Yeah.
came every day from Situate to come to camp. And Arthur Cadell, who I taught with, and I brought all these teachers in because I'll tell you, you couldn't replace them. They were
Correct.
just so fantastic.
Well,
Jimmy
Ed,
Navoni, Jimmy
yeah.
used to tell me the lowdown on Rivers teachers, on whether they would be good camp counselors.
Right.
Jimmy knew everybody. And Jimmy was spot on with the personalities and whether they would fit. And that next generation of kids like you guys moved up, and Andrew Navoni, and
I knew Andrew when he was 4, running around his dad on the field.
and Wendy
in
was
front
his
of the
swim
house.
counselor.
Yeah.
Wendy taught Andrew how to swim.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I was also one of those guys too, because I was living up in New Hampshire and drove
Yeah.
all the way down to Rivers.
That's
And
right.
I was the one who said, I want my daughter to have that kind
That's
of
right.
too.
That's right. I
And
remember that.
she did.
Yeah.
And she was able to, and she also fell asleep on the way back because it was a pretty tiring day.
Yeah.
But again, I was one of those people that I didn't care where I was. I was gonna get there and go and do, because it was that kind of camp.
Yeah. You know, you got to have the right mix.
Right.
You got to have kids that can relate to teachers, and then you got to have kids and teachers that relate to the older people, like my mother.
Right.
You know, and
everybody loved your mother.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody loved your mother.
Yeah.
I heard so many great things. Even the older kids, they may not have wanted to go to shop, but
Yeah.
they absolutely respected your mother big time, because
They did.
she didn't take any crap from anybody.
Yeah.
So she was old school. So it's old school, and this is how you doing on that project? How you doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
Kids were talking and stuff like that. But everybody loved her, and that
Yeah.
was something that was super important and to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody loved Jim Dancy, another guy
Oh, absolutely.
who
And you
I
know
used
it.
to speak to. Yeah, and you
it.
know it.
Yeah.
And went to the track with my brother Josh. So
Right.
all the time. So
Yeah. Larry Whitfield.
yeah, Larry Whitfield. Yeah, we're trying to get Larry on. Hopefully
Yeah.
Larry will listen to this one, and we'll try to
do
get
it.
him on. Him and Sarah.
Larry-
Sarah was great in the girls' camp.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
She even took a trip, when my daughter was a CIP, she took a trip to Natick Mall with the kids because she said, not only do you have to be able to deal with children, but you've got to look good.
Right.
And she introduced them to makeup at the Natick Mall. And they said, kids look at you, they want to look up to you, and you got to look good. People want to be friends with people who look good.
That's right.
I brought 2 kids that I taught. Remember the Bykoff brothers?
Yeah.
Lorne and Doug Bykoff.
Yeah.
And I knew they were going to fit in so beautifully. And remember they named the archery tournament after them? The Bykoff Invitational archery tournament we had every year. Yeah.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But you had to mix the right people. And then you got Colin, and Colin was the ideal, and George. They could work with everybody.
That's right.
And then you had so many different personalities that related to different kids. George related to one type of kid. Gerald related to another type of kid. Gerald took under his wing some of the kids that were not great athletes, but were trying hard. And Gerald gave them the confidence to continue to play. And Gerald was very, very wary of anybody who would say to a kid, you struck out, you stink, you're a loser. Gerald was on that kid right away. That we don't say that here.
That's right.
And Gerald and George with the basketball tournament on the rules, which was a riot. George had his way. Robbie was the timekeeper, right, Robbie?
That's right. I was a ref. I did the
You were
reffing.
ref, and everybody
yeah.
wanted, but the kids
I
saw
have the
that,
scoreboard.
and they saw everybody getting together to make fun for kids. And that's
Right.
what camp was all about.
Yeah. So some of the best stuff, Ed, was when Colin was at the waterfront.
Yeah.
And he was on with us. He was one of our guests. And he actually said, he was like, I had no idea really what to do at the waterfront. So what he did was he got together all these different games and different fun things to do. He put them together and brought them to the waterfront. And I'll tell you, filling canoes up with water, just all kinds of different games with tennis balls and all
Watermelon.
kinds of the watermelon.
Greasy
Yeah,
watermelon,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, the watermelon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very slippery, by the way. That's why he did it in the first place.
Yeah.
But just those kinds of things and those kinds of things made the camp what it is. And everybody that we've had on has said exactly the same thing. That it was whether they started at 10 years old or 5 years old, or they just started as a counselor, they had a tremendous experience no matter where they started in the progression of time. I started when I was 10 and then progressed through everything else.
Yeah.
I was CIT and I had Lloyd and your brother Jim. And Lloyd was the heavy and Jim was the, okay, no problem. I'll take care of that for you.
Right.
and so, yeah, those kinds of things really brought everybody together.
Can you see where the river spirit started? With
Yeah, a little bit,
Paul and Mark.
Yeah.
And that Potomac spirit, which then carried on.
Right.
And it really was, different generations from Potomac to Rivers that laid the foundation. And Mark and Paul deserve all the credit for bringing that over.
Absolutely. And every time I speak to Mark, every couple of weeks I speak to Mark, Mark still has that energy and still has that, I want to talk about Rivers and I want to talk about what happened back then. And I tell him the story about how we were going, how Larry, we used to take, the upper camp used to take trips. Every Friday we used to go off camp because we used to do something different, go off camp, and how the guy was falling asleep at the wheel and I was up front and I went to the back and told Larry, and Larry came up because Larry's a bus driver, and Larry came up and said, hey, buddy, you got to wake up. And he didn't. He was sitting right with me, and we
Right.
pulled over. And we called the bus company. The bus company came and switched our bus to this gorgeous, beautiful coach bus with a bathroom and all this kind of stuff. These are the kinds of things that everybody loves to talk about. They love to talk about the stories, and that's why Robbie and I, when we first got together, 4 years ago, and we just had our anniversary 4 years ago to do this show.
Yeah.
The Sports Bliss, we decided that we really wanted to keep Rivers alive.
Yeah.
This is where we met. This is where we met. We met at Rivers, and we want to keep the spirit that Mark and Paul started such a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you did too. We want to keep this alive by bringing people on and getting the stories out there, and they're on YouTube forever. And that's what we want to make sure that we accomplish.
That's great. It's great. And when Bernie and Dick and I get together, gosh, we tell the stories. We used to do pre-camp at Potomac.
Right.
And when we were in college, we got out of college like April 28th. BU got out very early. And I used to work at Potomac with Dick and Bernie from April 28th right until camp started late June. And then we did post-camp. So we worked May, June, July, August until we went back to college Labor Day. And it was great. And we had such funny stories with pre-camp. We painted everything, set up the camp. Dick and I laughed so hard because accidentally we painted everything. We painted a light bulb by accident, and the thing sizzled and popped. And because we were just painting, we were so tired. We're painting, and we painted a light bulb. And the thing exploded. And then one cold day, we made a fire in the dining hall fireplace, and Bernie, by mistake, because we were trying to clean up, threw a pillow in the fire.
Oh, no.
The pillow had duck feathers in it.
Oh, no.
Oh my goodness. You can't believe what that was like. And we laugh to this day about the fun that we had.
Yeah, it was yeah, go ahead.
And then there was I was doing some work when I was very young, but it's still a counselor and doing pre-camp underneath the office. And Tom Layden Jr. was up in the office. There were some secretaries in the office. And this guy comes out, and he used to work at camp. And he said, remember, Potomac was way out Route 16. And we had to get a lot of counselors that had cars that could take the kids out there besides the bus. So Tom Layden's so happy to see this guy. And he said to the guy, how have you been? Did you have a good year? He said, well, I was arrested for breaking and entering and robbery. Tom says, you still got that wagon, the station wagon? Well, you couldn't do that today. But we used to laugh at those things.
Yeah, so we're just, again, Robbie and I are just trying to keep things alive keep Rivers alive
and thank you for that.
by having people on, by having old counselors on, by having anybody that wants to come on to talk about Rivers, and everybody has talked just glowingly about. There were things that happened, but everybody has talked glowingly about it.
Sure.
And just the stories. Some of the stories I don't even remember.
You could write a book every year.
You could definitely.
Really?
I do want to tell you, Ed, that I did pre-camp. I can't remember who I did the pre-camp with.
I remember that.
I did. Yeah, remember the year that summer that I did pre-camp.
Yeah. Andrew,
we were cleaning out the office, the red building.
Yeah.
Basically the barn. We were cleaning out the barn. I told Mark, and you said whatever you find in there, just you can have it. Because you were like, you had gone to the, to that interesting building in between the, right next to the half. So what I did is I actually found original blueprints. I found pictures, camp pictures from a very long time ago. One of them actually has you in it. I think a couple of them have you in it. I found those and I actually have them, still have them.
Great.
And I wanted to make sure that they were preserved, and Mark had told me that there's a museum, actually, a Rivers School Museum that I guess
that's
is
right.
is on Hammond
pictures.
Street. Is it on
Yeah.
Hammond Street or near Hammond Street?
I'm
And-
not sure where it was.
Yeah,
But
it's right near Longwood. It's right near Longwood, the tennis, right
Yeah.
near Longwood, he said. And he
So
said they
that's
love
where
to.
the old, that's where
Yeah.
the old Rivers was.
Yes,
Hammond
yes.
Street,
He
yeah.
says it's in the same building, he said. And he said there's a lady there. He said he has brought some stuff over to her before he left. And I guess it would accept stuff and whatever, but I still have that stuff.
There's the Rivers.
Aerial views
Yeah.
of the camp.
Yeah.
And you could tell that some of the buildings aren't there.
Oh, sure.
You know, where we, you know, the new field house where we used to have cookouts on that big lawn there.
Yeah.
We used to do track. Jimmy used to do track on that lawn, a little
Yeah.
bit, little soccer on that field too, I believe,
Yeah.
if I remember.
Right.
correctly.
There's a Rivers Archives.
Yeah,
And I took pictures of everything as they were closing the camp. And that's those pictures, all the photographer, Lenny Wayne, who used to come out and take the
okay.
tribe pictures.
oh,
I-
right, yeah.
All those pictures we took pictures of, and they're in the archives. And you know who did the exact same thing for Potomac? Us.
Oh,
Dick-
really?
Dick and Bernie have all the old Potomac stuff,
Oh, wow.
all the archery awards, and, everything. It's great.
That's just wonderful. And again, I think what we're trying to do here is we're really just trying to keep Rivers alive, and we had such a great experience there, and we just want to keep it alive by having as many past Rivers people and people telling stories, and they smile when they tell them.
I've
They
enjoyed it
get
so much.
excited about it. So we're coming to the time, Ed, where we have our what we call our final thoughts for the evening. And it doesn't have to be at the final thought. If you don't want to do one, you don't have to, but we have a final thought for the evening. And if you wanted to go, we can have you go first, and then we'll have Robbie, and then I'll do a final thought for the evening. And go right ahead with a final thought
Sure.
if you have one,
Well,
or a
in my-
story. We all love those stories.
In my 68 years, 49 of them at Rivers, every single person that was there contributed to making that place what it was. And it is etched in my brain. That's why I remember all these stories. It was a big part of my life.
You remember names too, which is it's unbelievable.
I really do. One day I was coming back from New York on the Mass Pike, and I stopped to pay the tolls when they had toll takers before Easy Pass. And the toll taker leans out and says, "Ed Schreider, Rivers camper." He was a toll taker.
There it is.
Everywhere you go. But you guys contributed a lot, and everybody that I've met, and what a wonderful career I had, both in teaching and in camping. And I wouldn't want to have changed anything. And thank God, and I say it so many times, it was a safe 68 years. Thank God. Everybody went home at night.
Right. You
That
teach
was
people, you have the teachers, and you teach the counselors to do the right thing
Yeah.
and be the right way.
And you pray.
And you pray a lot every night.
You
There
do.
might have been some nights where we didn't sleep, or where I'm sure Mark didn't sleep, or you didn't sleep, and
Absolutely.
you just
Yeah.
know that things are going to be okay. And yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Robbie, your final thoughts for this unbelievable episode number 75 evening here.
Unbelievable is right, Doug. I mean, I think just want to say is, just how much I truly enjoy doing the Rivers episodes. I mean, it is so much fun to discuss about all these stories and just everything. I mean, it just brings a smile to my face every single time that we do one of these. And so I just want to say, obviously a big thank you to Ed for coming on with us tonight.
Thank
It
you.
has been so much fun, just like I said, hearing these stories and just remembering everything from time there and beyond. So it's been a great 75th episode, and I'm so glad that we're able to continue to do these and keep Rivers alive for sure.
Thank you, and thank you for being a big part of it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say absolutely a big, huge thank you to Ed Schreider for coming on and giving us a totally different history and a totally different perspective than anybody else we've had on. Everybody's been phenomenal. All the Rivers people that we've had on so far have been phenomenal. They have different stories. George has different stories. Colin has different stories. Dan Finucane has different stories. Andrew Navoni has different stories. Everybody has different stories about how they went through camp and what they did at camp and how it impacted them. And it totally impacted me. It totally made me into somebody who went to Mount Ida with Mr. Callahan.
I remember him.
And went to Mount Ida day camp, and I remember flopping on the ground at soccer because I didn't get the ball, and crying. And it was Parents' Day too, which is even worse. And by
the way, to say that I am representing Mount Ida College here tonight.
Yes,
you can't really see my shirt, but I am representing as a Mount Ida College alum
representing.
tonight.
Yeah,
that's where they're giving out the shots now, Mount Ida.
that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So what's interesting is that I have still some of the black and white pictures from Mount Ida. A lot of the kids that were at Mount Ida ended up at Rivers. A lot of my friends, a lot of my kids I went to school with ended up at Rivers Day Camp, which totally makes sense. But I definitely want to thank you, Ed, for coming on.
My
it was
pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having
to be
me.
able to have you come on and actually celebrate with us. And just this is a great episode, and we're so glad that you were able to be on.
Terrific. Thank you for having me. My
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Absolutely. And
thank you
again,
so much.
Yeah. What did you say, Robbie?
I was just saying thank you. Just
yeah, you're kind of cutting out a little bit there, but that's okay. You're kind of cutting out. Again, it's great to have you on, and we hope to have you on again if you come on again and talk more stories and stuff like that. And so that's it for episode number 75 of the Sports Blitz. That's Robbie. Actually, he's over there. Thank you so much to Ed, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much.
Take care.